The most ill-conceived business podcast around, the Business is Bullshit podcast. I'm James Hornick. Joining me are two of the most insane people I've met. I wish you guys could all hear the pre-conversations we have when putting this together. Anyways, Jared Gibson and Jon Tsourakis.
Yeah. There it is.
What? Why? There it is. Like, that's like the worst intro noise. Anyways, episode 5. We're going to talk about sales this week. You guys are ready? You guys excited? I hope so. Is your idea and topic anyway?
Sweaty palms of anticipation.
We'll do the transition. I got some news for you guys. I got a great email today. So I got this inbound, my email box.
Was it actually good, or was that sarcastic?
The title, Suggestion for Business is Bullshit Podcast, Jesse Anglin.
Boom, boom, boom.
I'll read this off. Hi, James. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to suggest Jesse Anglin, CEO or co-founder of Rapid Innovation, as a guest for your Business is Bullshit podcast. He's a seasoned expert in blockchain and innovation, blah, blah, blah. His views would resonate strongly. Here's his previous work. You know you've made it when you're getting spam invites, people trying to get on your show. So I think that's like, engagement's great, viewers is great, but when like the spammers have actually found your show, you have officially made it on the internet.
You're just how we named him. Like we just called his name.
I mean, so here's the thing. I honestly believe if you send people your shit and if you post something publicly, like that's public information. This whole, like, everyone's like, you shouldn't name the name. You should take it out. Like, he sent me an email. If he didn't want me to name it, he shouldn't have sent me the stupid email. But what I found hysterical is like, it's some blockchain guy trying to like, hype like crypto and Bitcoin. Like, you realize our podcast is mostly about shitting on stuff. So if you want us to like shit on your company or your blockchain or whatever scam you're running, sure, come on the show.
Topic for another time.
Yeah.
Was it a copy and paste, or was it spelled bullshit out, or was it
they removed the I, so because probably like their AI agent probably wouldn't put business is bullshit, they put business is bullshit. So that was a thing. But yeah, it's definitely one of those, kind of AI driven mass spam. They do just enough customization with the AI agent, make it look like it was a to you email, but everyone knows it's not.
So we get to like 5 listeners, and all of a sudden now we start getting it.
It's all it takes. We're big time. Anyway.
Yeah, nobody's going to listen.
Speaking of crappy sales techniques, Jared had a topic for this week that he wanted to get into. I'll lay this up. I wanted to give it some edge, but you kind of poo-pooed that. But I think the general theme you want to discuss is sales methodologies, maybe how they haven't stayed updated, but you have some strong thoughts on this. Jared, I'm just going to kick it over to you. A little hard pivot there.
Yeah, I don't think that they are necessarily, they don't work.
Give us an example of some of the names of the ones we're talking about.
First off, how did you guys get into sales?
I need a job and they were hiring.
Actually, I'm the same. It's the same thing with me. I majored in sociology in school because I realized that I was at Ohio State for way too long and my friends were all gone. So I'm like, hey, what am I going to major in? And they said sociology, which actually did help me out in sales. I learned a lot in sociology, which helped with sales. And I needed a job out of school. And I reached out to a buddy and started. And that's how I got into sales. But so when we talk about methodologies, like I was Sandler trained. Like Sandler sales was my background. If it wasn't for that Sandler sales training and rigorously understanding all the different rules in Sandler sales and everything and practicing that, like there's no chance that I would have become like any good at sales at all.
What was the training like? Like I read the book. Like you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar, I believe is the name of the title.
Yeah. So like the Sandler, the premise behind it was like there's all these Sandler rules, and there was an organization that I went through. The company that I started with was Spyglass, and Spyglass brought in this company called Sales Concepts, and they basically taught the young salespeople.
Yeah, one of the franchises.
About Sandler. Yeah, and it was great. And it was awesome. So you learned all the rules of Sandler sales, and then you actually would practice those when you're out and you're talking to people. And it's all about like getting to the pain, asking questions, asking follow-up questions, and doing it in a way that is meant to not come off as salesy, but actually like go through discovery. And it worked. It was awesome. It was like, I used it. I like still use some of the stuff today. Like the upfront contract is still, I think, one of the most important things that any salesperson can do. Like lay it out. Here's what it is. We're going to go through this stuff. If at the end, this is something that makes sense, we can talk about next steps. If not, let me know. You're not going to hurt my problem. You're not going to hurt my feelings, all this stuff. So Sandler sales was a huge part of me. And I was with that company for 9 years. And I take a lot of that stuff still, but this topic I think is important because while the core fundamentals of sales are always going to be the same, like build trust, identify pain, pull the solution, match the solution to their pain. That's always going to be there. I just think the buyer, and we've talked about this.
Yeah.
The buyer. Oh, speaking of textbook, we can talk about what you. Well, never mind. See, that's my problem. I need to stop going down rabbit holes.
Yeah, sorry, it's because I got you off track.
Just don't keep continuing in the rabbit hole.
But it's
fluffy tail dirty, bro.
But the core fundamentals of sales, I believe, are always going to be the same. The buyer has changed, and we talked about this before we hit play. The buyer has changed, and I just don't know if the training for the core fundamentals of sales with these programs has kept up with the buyer changing. The buyer is in control. The buyer is able to. The buyer has a wealth of knowledge and information at their hands. And they don't want to be death by 1,000 questions anymore. They already have answers to these questions. So if companies are still training their salespeople to follow the exact same tactics of these methodologies that were there before, I think that they're just missing a large part of what the methodology in general was meant for. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I learned sales from a womanizing 4-time divorced alcoholic, right? Who used to be like a Baptist preacher, right? So
that was every great salesman back in the day.
Yeah,
we should call out John. What state did you grow up in?
Florida. This guy was also Floridian. And also my other part was in college. There was literally a class, the curriculum I learned from a professor with deformed hands, the spin selling method, right? Mm-hmm. So, which is like solution problem. I don't remember what the whole acronym is. Yeah. But the point, so I learned that in college and then meet my former mentor. And ultimately what I learned was like, okay, there's all these different methodologies, right? Because everybody would pound the Sandler, the franchise. And then, of course, the Challenger's sale came out later. And then you had like the inbound craze, which is the total fucking hypocrisy of HubSpot, talking about inbound when they're like some of the best cold callers that were around at the time. Point being, it ultimately just comes down to, like you said, building a relationship with someone, but being genuine, right? So they can actually feel a connection and they can see what it is that they're going to purchase. And I think the best salespeople, and I have some stories on that, they ultimately take all of these different types of methodologies and they make them their own. Like that's the part that seems to be missing, where these old salespeople will still use these tactics. Dude, it's the most cringe-worthy experience if you've been through one of these lately.
So here's kind of my take. I think that, and obviously I agree with you, like buying has changed. I think every salesperson kind of recognized that. The two things I wanted to, we have to first differentiate. There's transactional sales and there's complex solution sales. I think everyone knows this. I mean, we work in a more complex solution selling world, but I think that people, it's often not quite understood. I believe that the world itself, like all products, even enterprise level sales, have become more complex over the years. Meaning, when my first job, I had a formal sales training. I was working for part of WorldCom, selling telecommunications and hosting back in the early 2000s. But that was what tech sales. That's what tech sales was in like the early 2000s. You know, like that was like there wasn't all these. But even these were big contracts. They were a big spend, so it was an enterprise type play. But it was still kind of transactional. Like you were still kind of like selling like the telecom. They're selling the same fucking thing. They weren't really like everyone knew what the product was. They were competing on price. Maybe they had a better relationship, that type of thing. But there wasn't anything. Meanwhile, like conceptualize that, you know, right? You're just selling an internet pipe, no matter what year it was. Now you've got your company you're selling some AI based CRM system with add-ons that can like diagnose things and do things like all these very complex granular things which no one really understands a lot of times maybe they get it but they don't quite know how they can benefit from it, and I think the discovery is more complex, and I think the understanding in order to sell a lot of this stuff, like you have to actually understand like economics, your client's business process, like be familiar with their industry, with their decision-making process, which not that many people can do to begin with. Yet a lot of like classic sellers, they're still reading scripts. They're still going through the same process that probably worked really, really well 20 years ago. And then everyone wonders why like selling has gotten so hard when like, I mean, salespeople haven't gotten any smarter. But to your point, it's like we have to, I've always maintained that junior level sellers, like when you read through scripts, they sound robotic. No one wants to hear that shit. No one wanted to hear that shit in the first place. But at least 20 years ago, like there wasn't much to it. Like, okay, kid, what's your pitch? What's your price? Cool. That's it. Now there's just so much more that's like needed to do a proper sale and I think that's what like age and time in the market doing this as a salesperson gets you there. But I think that's what's really missing is like you need to find a way to bridge that gap faster.
There's
comfort.
One of the ways, and I think that this is actually one that is the book very important that is still around is the Miller-Hyman, the new strategic selling.
Yeah.
Like they've updated it and the whole process, but there is like a blue sheet. The whole premise behind the Miller-Hyman way is that there's a blue sheet, and salespeople go into this blue sheet. They update the blue sheet, and the blue sheet is basically it makes sure that you're checking all the boxes that are necessary along the sales process. Like, do we have all the buyers, the economic, the user, the technical buyer, do you have a coach internally, right? And if there's any red flags where you don't have those, then there's a hole in your process that you need to figure out. So there's some companies that do a really good job, and a previous company that I was with did a really good job, or the private equity group that ran it, taught it, that like, how's the blue sheet look? Yeah, it's great. You can tell me that you had a great conversation with so-and-so and that you presented a proposal. Like, let me see your blue sheet. And if the blue sheet was not filled out, or there are still red flags, then there are still things that you needed to do. So I do think that and that's, I guess, maybe not as much of a methodology as it is.
So that
like
it's more like a management tracking tool is what that sounds like to me.
I wouldn't say management tracking tool. It's if you're a seller, like the blue sheet is what you should look at. Like, hey,
like
how realistic is
the milestones haven't changed. Like the actual things you need to make sure, like that hasn't changed. But how you gain that information and make sure it happens has changed, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe.
BANT's my favorite. It's brutal simplicity, which I just absolutely love, right? So it's a budget, authority, need, and timing. And essentially, like, if you don't have those elements, like a deal's not going to progress. And if you just control it throughout the entire process, kind of taking from Challenger without, being annoying, the probability of you closing a deal is like really high. Like that's the one that I believe has served me the best.
I want to get back to the insanity of modern sellers and the things they say. Here's an example, and this is a real. I was on this call. I'm not going to say
some great stories. Here we go.
I'm not going to name names here, but I was on a call that had multiple.
We're just going to start throwing names out. I'm
sales leaders involved. I don't actually remember who specifically said this.
Was it Carl?
It was not Carl.
I don't know who that is.
So I was on this conference call with a bunch of sales leaders. I was kind of tuned out, like I wasn't really engaged in the whole thing. But I kept hearing like buzzwords, rapid fire coming, and all of a sudden, at some point, I like kind of chuckled, and I'm like, all right, I got to write this down. I am not making this up. This is not an exaggeration. This is not some list I pulled to like make some like funny video out of whatever. I started just writing down the buzzwords that were coming out. All of these phrases came out within a 2-minute time frame.
Could we guess? Could we guess any of them? Like, I feel like John and I could just start guessing.
Yeah.
I don't think you will. Honestly, I don't think you will.
Are these like buzzwords or are these...
It's not buzzwords. It's terminology. Like, let me rip this off. Just let me get through this. Loss of intuition, foothold, sources of action, nonlinear sales cycle, reimagined visuals, different logic trees, 7 different steps of active courting, the next equalizer, those thresholds need to be mapped, replumb all our traditional marketing, meet seller in a place that harmonizes with the buyer. All these things came out of someone's mouth in a seriously, not being a parody themselves within like a 2-minute period.
Damn. Man.
Who talks like that? Like, I just don't like it. And people do.
People that say IE.
Is this person in marketing or sales?
Sales. But
sales leader.
Yeah, sales leader.
I mean,
but that's the thing. So that's the disconnect. That's where people. Yeah. There's this chasm that just organically gets created, with a lot of salespeople where, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the mechanisms they need to keep themselves confident and go out there and potentially face rejection. But they build up this wall, and it just pushes them further and further away from the person that they're supposed to connect with.
They want to use the most complex sounding words to describe the most simple things to make themselves sound smarter because they want to talk over people's heads. Yeah. That way they feel like
what
they
is
have
it, like
some
the Fleischmann reading scale or something? You're never really supposed to talk higher than at like a 7th grade level, and you're not supposed to use those $10 words.
That's easy for me. I'm good to go with that.
Yeah, Daddy Dahmer paid off again.
I peak at 7th grade.
So getting back to the training thing, scripts though, like that, I think that's where it all starts because like every training program, it starts with like someone reading a script, like learning it, and this is where I don't know the answer. I have kind of mixed thoughts on it. Like there's something about repetition and having comfort in that. But at the same time too, I believe that when you're taught to read a script in the modern age, you are taught to become an AI. Like you're basically becoming a human chatbot. When the three of us know, and everyone out there knows, that's the wrong approach. Now I realize that's maybe a training moment and like a first step, but at the same time too, like when's the last time like a BDR like called you up and like started reading through, and you're like, oh yeah, kid, like I want to buy your stuff. Like you get so turned off by it anymore. And my take is that I'm not saying any of the sales methodologies in terms of the process or anything is wrong anymore. Like I think we've kind of established like these are the key steps that you need to have. But I do believe it's more important than ever that finding ways to get people jumping to how to become human again and how to build relationships and not how to feel lesser than the person you're selling to when you're younger is something that needs to be emphasized because that's ultimately what makes you a good salesperson eventually. I don't know how to get there, but I really think that's where a lot of like sales trainers and sales training methodologies are missing at this point.
I have a take on that and a story.
I do too.
So,
a better take.
Do you want to go first, John?
Go first, John.
So you can one up me that way. So
let's go downhill. So let's start with John, then go to Jared.
So sales is just a series of conversations.
That's a terrible fucking story, John. That's a god awful.
Not a story.
This is not even a story. It's just
this is the reality, right? So are we go? So we said takes. We didn't say story time. So anyway, yeah, that's all sales is a series of conversations, right? So if you have a script, like who is going to want to sit on the other side of that table while you read that script? Like it's the most awful experience ever. So if you're just literally having a series of conversations with someone, essentially just trying to find out whether they're a fit for whatever it is that you're selling. That's all it is. But all we do is complicate it. And we have all these methodologies and all these different things. I've met people that have no training in methodologies, and they're just naturally a fantastic salesperson. I bet if you try to jam one of these methodologies into them, they're just going to organically fold. So if you just understand that's what it is, it tends to work out.
But I would argue that if they're that good at sales, they're probably, going back to what James said, unbeknownst to them, already adopting a lot of these methodologies without knowing that they are. If that makes sense.
Without knowing. Right? Yeah, they're just, because all it is with connecting with someone.
It's logical, like it just makes sense to like ask the important questions before you start fucking pitching shit. Like it's just so fucking simple that like every methodology needs to reinvent the wheel in the best way of doing it. But like ask questions like fucking and know what the problem is if you can solve the problem and then give your solution. Like well,
they should know in 2024, they should already know what the problem is.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Like
do you
they're
have
selling
herpes?
Something that they already know.
Here's Valtrex. That's simple.
Yep. Exactly. And that's the clip. There we go, John. I was just thinking like, when are we going to get that clip from you? There it is.
That's a good one. So you guys want to hear a story about one of the best salesmen I ever worked with?
Jared, did you have a one up or is that your?
Oh yeah, did you have one up me or did
no? I have a story about like just my like where I was and like my sales leader, my mentor, also happens to be my like best friend. Shout out Larry Seiler. I used to, when we talk about script, I had note cards all over because I was pounding 100 dials a day, getting CFOs on the phone. This is back when people actually answered the phone. And I had note cards plastered, taped all over. Like, if they say this, this is what you're going to say, right? Here's the script, like Sandler stuff everywhere. And like one day I came and I was like legit, like I knew exactly where the cards were. And one day I came into the office and all this shit was gone. And Larry basically was like, dude, he's like, you know it. Like, just go. It was like comfort zone, like great trainer, all this stuff. And he's right. I did. But then when I went to outside, what's that?
Sounds like a moment in like a B movie.
It actually did. It's a good observation. I'm gonna give that was another clip.
When I went out in like the wild and was actually meeting with these CFOs, there was times I knew that I would wake up in the middle of the night, like with the pitch. It was the same thing over and over again. And I realized like I was just going through the motions in these meetings. Like there was no empathy. I wasn't listening. I was just waiting for them to get through with whatever the fuck they were saying so that I could say what I needed to say next.
Waiting to talk.
Right? Waiting to talk. And when
it's like me with this podcast.
100%.
That'd be a great name for a podcast.
No, I'm fucking with you. Anyways, I think we've all been there. And I want to say too,
but you have to realize. To realize in the moment when you're doing it. That's my thing. It's like, I think too many people don't understand that, like, and especially younger salespeople today, just try to jam that shit in and don't actually look to realize that I am doing this today, or their managers aren't. Never mind.
Yeah. So my buddy,
John, I want to hear your story.
This isn't the story. There's two stories. This one will be quick. So my buddy owned a title company, national title company, and he hires this guy. He's like, oh, he's a veteran. He's like, he's been in the real estate space for years. He's really going to help us, in some of these markets. I was like, all right. So, it was one of our marketing accounts. I'd sit in some of these board meetings, and I'm in there, and this guy would fall asleep. He's old, dude. I'm talking like he's like he had to be approaching 80 something.
There was a guy at one of my old companies originally that did the same. He fell asleep in a meeting.
But get that? So there'd be like a trigger word, right? So he would say something. He would say like, yeah, hey, and prices are going up in this real estate market. And the guy would be like, real estate. he would fire open, and then he would just go back down again or whatever. And then he would just say closings. Like it was just like, it was like he would just wind this fucker up. In any event, all right. Best salesman.
Sure he wasn't a heroin addict, maybe? I don't know. It was maybe. Florida, so yeah.
Yeah. All right, so one of the best salesmen I've ever met. So he works for a tech company that's a client of ours, right? And he calls me one day, and we're having a conversation, and he says, "Hey, do you work with any plumbing manufacturers?" And it's like, no. And these are the companies that build stuff or that manufacture stuff that's in Home Depot and whatnot. And he's like, no. He said, all right, hey, names the companies. Like, they're huge. They're here in town. They're a client. He's like, good friends with the CMO. Meet me there at 2:00. It's like, okay, all right, that sounds great. So I walk up. I'm walking up to the main reception desk, and I see him. He's coming down the hall, and he's with another gentleman. So I walk up to him, and he's like, oh, hey, yeah, go ahead, meet Frank here. Frank's the CTO. And we shake hands. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, well, we're here to meet the CMO. And then he starts walking to the reception desk, and he says, hey, can you tell me where the CMO's office is? And she said, yeah, it's down the hall. And I'm thinking, like, why doesn't he know where the CMO's office is? And he's like, yeah. He's like, what's her name again? And she's like, oh, yeah, it's Linda. And he's like, oh, okay. And I was like, why doesn't he know the CMO's name or whatever? So we start walking down the hall and, to the direction. And then there's another little reception desk. This is a pretty big company. And it's apparently the CMO's assistant. And he says, hey, where's Linda at? She said, oh, she's in a meeting, and points to these two double doors that are across the hall. And before she can say anything else, he bursts open the doors. And in there is a full-on board meeting that's going on at the time. Like everybody. And they look over in horror. Some people are scowling. Some people are like, what the hell's going on? Like, they're interrupted. And then this lady says, hey, can we help you with something? In a very terse, rude way. And he says, are you Linda? She said, yes, yeah, I'm Linda. She's like, what can I help you with? He's like, I want you to meet Jon Tsourakis, the best marketer you have ever met in your life. He's like, hey, give me a card. Give me a card. Dude, I'm like horrified. I'm like hiding like behind the door. He's like, hey, give me a card. Hand her a card. So I go over and I hand her the card. And then I was like, oh, hey, yeah, be sure to call. And she's like, yeah, all right. Dude, they're doing co-op with Home Depot in this room. There's advertisements and everything. It's absolutely horrible. So we leave, and I felt kind of dirty. I was definitely pretty shocked. And I was like, dude, I thought you said you knew the CMO. He's like, well, I do now.
Did he close anything there? Is there
He already had that as a kind. So I kind of want to say his name, but I kind of don't because I don't want to ruin anything for him. But this guy has got like the Regions Bank account. He's got like FedEx account. Like he is just a bull in a china shop. Like, dude, you tell him like that's what has to happen, and he will go and get it. And the most gruff, and he doesn't follow any of these methodologies. He probably studies them, but dude, he talks more in a sales environment than anybody I know. Like if you looked at like, you know, the dialogue to ratio based on conversation, he's at like 90%. Nobody gets a word in edgewise.
So you're saying nothing means anything, really? Like this is all like we just waste.
That's what I'm saying.
We just completely waste our time with this podcast. You just fucking just don't give a fuck and just walk in.
It doesn't matter. When you hear the hey, they should be talking more than you, and like no, this guy's the best, and he talks 90+% of the time.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
I would like to point that out. You said he's the best salesman you've met, and he talks 90% of the time.
Totally, and it's an anomaly. Like I follow the rule that I'm never the exception, right? There are exceptions, and you meet these people, and you're just like, what? And you can't learn from them.
Let me ask you this: is he a likable guy? You're not saying his name, so you can say this.
He's likable, and yeah, absolutely. Like he is very self-effacing. He is not like arrogant. Like you meet him, and you're instantly, he's got some magnetism to him. But dude, like, and he'll pull off things. And same thing with my old mentor. Like you would just see things that just don't make sense. Both overweight guys too. That might be a factor, right? Dude, we were at this networking event. Same guy. Check this out.
What is happening right now?
Hey, maybe some salespeople just need to gain a little bit of weight. Maybe that's what they're missing. They need to pump up the numbers.
It's rookie numbers. You gotta get this. Jared, can you? Jared, you had a thought, please.
We're going through an interview. We're going through an interview process right now, and you're in shape. Need you to get fat fast. Like I think you could be good, but you're not fat enough.
Or it's better yet. There's the interview process, and someone's like, "I think we need to give the overweight one a chance."
Jesus. I like how things are still PC enough. You couldn't say the more obvious word. You just still don't feel comfortable saying it.
Fatso?
All right.
I was trying to be realistic based on what would actually be
nobody's going to listen to this.
Is there a takeaway to this? Is there a takeaway to this edition of it? I don't really think we've really landed on anything.
I mean,
what is the
ultimately, you got it or you don't. You can't learn it, kid.
I think that there are old school salespeople that are still stuck on old school tactics and methodologies. That is like, this is what got me here, and I'm not going to change anything. But the best salespeople today are the ones that are using the methodologies, but are using it in 2024 ways, right? Understanding who the buyers are. The buyers have changed. The buyers aren't the same that they were back in the mid 90s, the early 2000s. The buyers are very different today. And if you don't know that your buyer is already 85% of the way to a decision, don't try to jam something down their throat they don't want to hear. Like use empathy, build trust, and that's how the best sellers today are ultimately closing a shit ton of business and making a shit ton of money.
I would say don't confuse yourself. Ultimately, believe in what you sell, figure out how to connect with people, and you will do great.
Yeah. What do you think, James? What do you think? I know you got a thought.
I just don't be a robot. I think that what I want to talk about in the next podcast, we'll lay this one up because we never do this. I think another thing we need more time to get into is, and this is something I find interesting. Junior sales right now is in a weird space because everything's remote and there's AI everywhere. And the model of hiring tons and tons of BDRs, which we're talking about trainings, we're talking about kind of junior people. What's that going to look like in 5 years? Or what should it look like in 5 years? And it's just too much to get into right now. But I do think that both in terms of like what sales training, how younger people need to be trained to be effective quickly, as well as what that role is even going to look like as kind of sales change is interesting. Because I think I do think there's going to be some pretty massive changes on the horizon. I mean, there are already. But things have been cut back in how they're going to grow from here. But let's come back to that next time.
put a pin in it. Quickly is a problem.
Mm.
So quickly is a problem because that's people don't. The training sucks now.
Yeah,
everybody wants something quickly. So yeah, that'll be a good topic. I've got thoughts. I've got takes.
All right. Well, we'll save that for next time. That's called a teaser. Boom. That is a wrap for episode 5 of the Business is Bullshit podcast. Jared, we're halfway to your goal. Your goal was to get 10 to see if we can do it.
I mean,
we're gonna blow past that. We're gonna blow past that. Don't even worry about it.
We may get canceled after this one.
Yeah. Anyways. Yeah. Thanks,
Dude,
John.
That's not going to work. Like, we may be fucked.
No way, not a fatso.
All right. Anyways, catch us on. I'm shutting this down. Catch us on iTunes and Spotify, maybe some other places. I don't know. James Hornick, Jared Gibson, Jon Tsourakis signing off, reminding you business is bullshit. See you later, guys. It's a rough one.